Metro 2035, Dmitry Glukhovsky, Chapter 12, The Order. They left from Borovitskaya, a cozy red brick space looking like the reading room of a medieval university, crammed with shelves of books stolen from the surface, from the great library and wooden plank desks at which these books were studied and discussed, populated with the book-loving cranks who called themselves Brahmins and keepers of knowledge. Lamps with cloth shades hung down low over the desks, giving a kind, gentle light. And the Middle Ages, as Artyom had seen them in children's history books with pictures, were infiltrated by the spirit of Moscow apartments, as he recalled them from pictures ripped out of his own 4 short years of childhood. The archways were blocked off to form rooms. As Artyom walked by one, a memory of the past swept over him from his first visit to Paulus. A night spent in a good man's home, conversation deep into the night, a strange book that claimed there were fiends imprisoned in the ruby-red stars of the Kremlin, and there was a little demon in the little star of every child of October. An absurd book. The truth was always simpler and more appalling than people could imagine. That good man no longer existed, and the Kremlin stars had been extinguished. And the miller who had met Artyom here, with a Pecheneg machine gun slung over his shoulder and his body crisscrossed with ammunition belts, the commander who was always at the front of his troops, who was first into the thick of every battle, he no longer existed either. And that Artyom didn't exist. They had both been reduced to charcoal. But Letyaga was the same as ever, a squinting eye, a back broad enough to block a tunnel, and a smile as if he had just tied your bootlaces together and was waiting for you to stumble. He was 27, but his smile belonged to a 10-year-old. Letyaga was fireproof. "Hey!" He unsheathed that smile of his. "So congratulations are in order, then. The old man's taken you back?" Artyom shook his head. "What then? A test assignment?" "A swan song. I'm just going to the Reich with you." Letyaga stopped smiling. "What do you want with that place?" "I have to get someone out of there. There's a good person I really need to get out. If I don't go back, there'll be a hanging. You're a reckless bastard. Is it a woman at least?" Letyaga winked at him. "An old man with a beard." "Ah," Letyaga croaked. "That's your business, but You great oaf, shut up," said Artyom, restraining his smile. He felt embarrassed by the thought of Homer, but he ended up laughing anyway. The laughter rose up out of him, chewed up, glutinous and acrid. The laughter convulsed him, exhausted him, devastated him, and Artyom sank down onto a bench to avoid going down on all fours. Everything that the Metro had forced him to swallow in the last few days came bursting back out of his mouth, undigested as laughter. He laughed until his eyes watered, until he started hiccuping. He pumped air into his lungs and started again. Letyaga laughed together with him, maybe about something of his own, or maybe about nothing at all, and then it passed off. "A secret mission, definitely," Letyaga summed up confidently and entirely seriously. "They don't write off guys like you, brother. They didn't." "I've been wanting to ask you for a long time," Artyom told him. "Just how do you take aim?" He turned his eyes in towards his nose in imitation of Letyaga. "You ought to see everything double." "I do see everything double," Letyaga admitted. "That's why I use up so much ammunition. Every normal guy's got 1 target, but I've got 2, and I shoot at both of them. It's no accident the old man's sending me to the Reich. The cheapskate wants to get rid of me." "Do you think it's a one-way ticket?" Artyom chuckled. "I travel on tokens." Letyaga winked at him, raising his finger to jingle the dog tags of the medals hanging round his neck instead of a cross so that he could be identified. "What do you need them for? There's no way you could be confused with anyone else anyway." "Ah, you'll never see that day," Letyaga chuckled. "This is for something else. You know how it is when you wake up sometimes and wonder, who am I? And what did I drink? And then, okay, well, at least who am I?" "I know," Artyom sighed. The other 2 men walked over. One had high cheekbones, a prickly crew cut, and narrow eyes. The other had a bulbous boxer's nose and was agile and loose-limbed. "Well, you take your time getting ready, like bimbos going on a date, but I can see you were hurrying after all. You didn't get time to put your lipstick on," Letyaga told them. "We'll do that on the way then, all right?" "Who's this?" The loose-limbed one prodded Artyom offhandedly. That's no way to say hello. Letyaga shook his head. It's not who's this, but who are you, Urets. Artyom was with us in the bunker. This is a living legend, that's who. You were still chasing rats around Hansa with a rattle when Artyom and the colonel flattened the Dark Ones with missiles. Then where did he disappear to? The other man asked. He's been building up his strength, Nigmatulin, for new feats of heroism. Right, Artyom? He hasn't built up much, Nigmatulin remarked, looking Artyom up and down skeptically. Every day's a major feat for me, Artyom responded. I don't have anything left over for myself. Battle yet again, boys, and the girls are just a dream, Letyaga cited, backing him up. Okay, guys, let's go. The Fuhrer's waiting. And the Fuhrer doesn't wait. He saluted the weedy Borovitskaya border guards smartly, and all four of them went down the ladder onto the tracks. The tunnel enveloped them, at first illuminated, then gloomy, then pitch dark. The other two hung back a bit, letting Artyom and Letyaga go ahead. That guy's from Hansa, right? Artyom asked. They're both from Hansa. Nigmatulin's from Komsomol, and Urets is from Culture Park, I think. Normal guys, by the way, both of them. Reliable. Letyaga thought for a moment. They're almost all from Hansa. All of who? All our reinforcements. Why's that? Well, where else can you get guys with training? No point in scouring the dark stations, or collecting them like the fascists do with that legion of theirs, all sorts of rabble. That's not for us. Miller pulled off some kind of deal with Hansa, and they agreed to bring us back up to strength. Artyom gave him a quizzical look. And he agreed to that? He cursed them, remember? Back there when in the bunker. They promised to help us, and they shafted us. If they'd shown up then, if they'd given us men, maybe we wouldn't have had to be brought back up to strength. All those boys of ours, to be blunt, said Letyaga. They didn't give us any men then, but they did afterwards. They gave them when they could, and they threw in all sorts of equipment and ammunition too. You know yourself how much money Hansa has. They made the offer themselves. Well, and the old man was in deep mourning, drinking to the list of our men. But there was nothing he could do. There was nowhere he could get another 50 men. Then he consulted the guys. They all understood, so they started recruiting on the quiet. With tests, that only stands to reason, and interviews. They sifted the riffraff out straight away. And in the end, it turned out okay. Hansa Special Forces, mostly. So everything's peaceful and quiet with them. It's not like we're on our own and they're on their own. We're all together. Uh-huh, said Artyom, clearing his throat and nodding at the two men hanging back. All in the same boat, Letyaga insisted. I don't believe it, Artyom said after a pause. What? I don't believe that simply to exonerate itself, Hansa would allocate us 50 fighting men and throw in equipment on top of that. They don't do anything for nothing. But it isn't for nothing. The old man signed on to train their special forces because... Letyaga clicked his tongue. They're not really all that special, especially when it comes to the surface. They're as helpless as kittens up on top. Children of the catacombs, fuck it. The last light bulb was left dangling somewhere far behind, and Letyaga took a torch that looked like a club out of his knapsack. The two men behind moved up closer and clattered their automatics. It was a short tunnel, well known to everyone, but still not much fun to walk. Better to stick close together. The torch immediately lanced into the darkness in the tunnel, filling it with milk and then stirring it up. The catacombs. But you're the same age as me, Artyom recalled. So you were 4 too, right? When the final war... Oh no, kid, said Letyaga. I'm a year older than you. We already figured that out, so I was 5. Artyom tried to picture his own Moscow, but those pot-bellied dragonfly planes soared into his head again, and the little carriage cars drove in trembling, and a fine, warm rain started falling. He shook his head to fling out this tenacious nonsense, this fantastical vision. And what do you remember? Your parents? Your flat? I remember the television. I remember them showing the president on the television. We had a great big one, and the president said, "We have no other choice. They've forced us into it. They've driven us into a corner. They shouldn't have driven us into a corner, so I have decided." And then my mother came in from the kitchen carrying a bowl of chicken soup for me. Noodle soup it was. She said to me, "Why are you watching all this terrible stuff? Come on, I'll put the cartoons on for you. And I told her, I don't want any noodles. I remember that very moment, the very beginning, or the end, after there weren't any more cartoons or more noodles. And do you remember your parents? I do, but it would be better if I didn't. Listen, Letyaga, loose-limbed Yurets interrupted. It was them who hit us first. We didn't hit them, they hit us, without warning, and we intercepted the first salvo before we fired. I'm telling you, I was 7. And I'm telling you, noodles stood in the corner and forced to eat it. I thought at the time, there's the president, and he gets put in the corner too. What difference does it make now? Artyom asked. Whether it was us or them. There is a difference, Nigmatulin objected. We wouldn't have started it. Our people are sane and responsible. We were always for peace. Those bastards blocked us in. They dragged us into the nuclear arms race so they could run us into the ground. They wanted to break up the country, carve it into pieces, for the oil and the gas, because our state was like a thorn in their side. They didn't want any independent countries at all. Everyone just lay down and spread their legs for them. We were the only ones who snarled back at them. And those lousy bastards, those assholes pushed us. They just didn't expect us to go all the way. They thought we'd piss ourselves, but they wanted to break us up, that was it. No surrendering to the enemy. Fuck them and their oil grabbing. They wanted to colonize us. But they ended up shitting themselves, the dickheads, when their TV showed them what was flying their way. That's what you get for playing the tough guy with us, and we're still not croaking even underground. How old were you then? Artyom asked. What business is that of yours? I was one. The old guys told me. So what? So nothing, Artyom replied. So nothing on that side of the ocean, so nothing on this side either. Letyaga cleared his throat to smooth things over. They didn't talk anymore after that. Halt! Extinguish the torch! Nigmatulin and Yurets parted and pressed up against the walls, with their automatics half raised. Artyom stayed in the center of the tunnel with Letyaga. A button clicked obediently and the light fizzled out. Night fell. The border's closed. Turn round and go back. We're from the Order! Letyaga shouted into the echoing well. With a message for your leadership. Turn round and go back, a voice repeated out of the well. I told you, we have a letter for the Führer, in person, from Colonel Miller. The red spots of laser sights leapt out of the darkness, darted about, and then jumped onto Letyaga's forehead and Artyom's chest. Get back! We have orders to shoot to kill! So that's all their fucking diplomacy for you, Letyaga summed up. They won't let us in, Yurets whispered. There was no order to obtain entry by force, Nigmatulin responded. But we were told to deliver the envelope, Letyaga objected. Otherwise the old man will rip my head off. I don't know what's in there, but he said if it's not delivered, everything's down the tubes. There was a sweet, putrid smell of musty urine. Apparently no conveniences were provided at the guard post, and when the sentries had to pee, they simply walked down the dark tunnel into no man's land. Artyom looked at the ruby-red spot marking the position of his heart. He thought about Miller and about his own final mission that was still uncompleted, to go home to Anya and tell her that he was leaving her. Tell her to her face and not go running off secretly with his tail between his legs for the sake of great causes. He had already stirred up more than enough trouble for the sake of great causes. He had left Olejek to that doctor after doing everything that he could, just dumped the body with its leaky holes, dusted off his hands and gone off to drink vodka. He had let Lyoka walk down the steps into nowhere whistling and decided not to interfere or try to bring him back. Some went left, some right, to each his own. He hadn't driven the condemned prisoners out into freedom with Svinolup's Nagant pistol. He hadn't asked about the woman's slippers in the major's office, and he hadn't jerked the curtain aside. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't tried to see if there was anyone there or not. And since he hadn't seen, that meant there wasn't anybody. That was what he could tell himself, and he could live very calmly with that. And he'd be able to make up some explanation about Homer, too, about that worthless old man and illiterate scribbler. Everyone just lied about the pangs of conscience. A man was strong, and he could cope with anything. And great affairs excused everything. He tried to cover the trembling spot of light with his palm, and it jumped up onto his hand. Final warning! A voice shouted out of the well of darkness. Do we pull back, then? Letyaga asked himself. Leave the old man. Leave all your corpses, clear off into this dark well and put the lid on it. You have a more important mission, Artyom. To save the world. You mustn't waste your time on mushrooms. Find Dietmar! Artyom shouted into those dark depths, and his voice turned squeaky. Who? Dietmar! Tell him the stalkers come back! What's all this about? Letyaga turned towards Artyom. What kind of story's this? It's all the same story, about the old man with a beard. Artyom tried to smile. And about a certain idiot, my secret assignment. And at that moment, in their little flea pit of a universe, a supernova lit up. Dietmar came out to the first machine gun nest of the first checkpoint. He probably looked at the bold, decorated warriors hiding behind their hands and laughed to himself. But he didn't turn off the searchlight. Who called me? I did. Artyom. Artyom? Dietmar seemed to have forgotten him. What Artyom? I knew it! Nigmatulin huffed. The stalker, with a dispatch for the Fuhrer. Personal delivery, from Miller, from the head of the Order concerning the situation. Concerning what situation? Dietmar didn't want to understand him. At Teatralnaya, concerning your invasion. Our invasion from Miller? Dietmar sounded surprised. There isn't any invasion. There is unrest at Teatralnaya. We have refugees flooding in. The Fuhrer has ordered the establishment of a peacekeeping mission at the station in order to prevent casualties. But it's after 3 in the morning now. He's sleeping, and he's not expecting any letters from Mr. Miller. But if you wish, you can let me have the dispatch. In the morning, I'll hand it on to him at his secretariat. Out of the question, Letyaga prompted in a whisper. Instructions are to hand the document to him in person or destroy it. Out of the question, Artyom repeated in a shout. To be handed only to the Fuhrer in person. A great pity, Dietmar sighed. The Fuhrer is not receiving anyone, especially professional cutthroats. Before being handed to him, the envelope will, in any case, be opened and examined to avoid any attempt at poisoning. I am in possession of information, Artyom said, bracing himself, that the events at Teatralnaya are not public unrest, but deliberately planned subversion, designed to take over the station. But we are in possession of different information concerning Teatralnaya. Dietmar responded indifferently. And not everyone likes it, Mr. Stalker, including your comrades, for example. Goodbye. He saluted them, swung round, and started striding towards the station. Wait, Letyaga shouted. Stop! This envelope isn't from Miller. Dietmar couldn't care less. The machine gunner stirred the long sting of his barrel, pointing out the pathway for the lead bullets. The snipers released their spots free, and these spots even pierced through the floodlight's white light that was as bright as the first second of death. Do you hear me? Letyaga roared. The envelope isn't from Miller, it's from Besolov! The black figure that had almost dissolved into the whiteness froze. Repeat that! From Besolov to the Fuhrer, in person, urgent! Artyom turned towards Letyaga. There was something going on here that he couldn't understand. Nigmatulin and Yuretz were anxiously mulling over the unfamiliar name. Dietmar didn't say anything, but he was glued to the spot. Very well, one man will be allowed into the station. The others can wait. Letyaga jerked his massively broad shoulders, accepting the condition. He stepped forward. Not you. Dietmar stopped him. Give the dispatch to that boy, Artyom. I have my orders, and I have my orders. He's the only one I'll let through, and only after he has been searched. Why him, Artyom? What the hell? Give me the envelope, Artyom told him. Come on, Letyaga, you saw through me. A secret mission. This is what Miller sent me for, in case they wouldn't let you. I have my own story mixed up in this. You're not allowed to know. How do you think I found out about Teatralnaya? Everyone here has his own story. Fuck it! Letyaga growled. They all hide them from each other. The old paranoiac. Don't give it to him. Are you crazy? Nigmatulin hissed. Who is he anyway? The colonel said you should do it. Or we... Shut your gob, Ruslanchik, Letyaga told him. This is Artyom, all right? He's one of us, our man. Got that? As you wish, said Dietmar, turning cool. I don't have any more time for this. I ought to be at Teatralnaya already, handing out humanitarian aid to the population. Letyaga cursed him, spat in annoyance, and pulled a small, brown, thick, opaque envelope out of the pocket over his heart. He handed it to Artyom. "This is our man. Is that clear?" He yelled to the machine gun, the sniper's rifles, the spot of laser light, the black stencils, the piss-soaked universe, and the blinding star. "We'll be waiting here for him." "By all means," Dietmar responded, "but the Fuhrer can sleep until midday." "Wait. We'll be waiting. We'll be here, Artyom," Letyaga whispered passionately. "You'll come back. If they harm even a hair on your head..." The old man growls at you, of course, but he'll move mountains for his own men. "We be one blood, thou and I?" "Right," said Artyom. He wasn't hearing much at this stage. "Right, Letyaga. Thanks. I don't know." "Enemies of the Reich, enemies of mankind, a horde of freaks stands at the gates." There was only one speaker, but he was broadcasting from a dozen loudspeakers lagging slightly behind each other, and so he repeated his words as his own echo. And this chorus of one man's voice sounded like the voice of a hydra, eerie and mesmerizing. That voice was oozing with venom. "If we do not fight to the last, we are threatened with total annihilation." The voice reached Artyom before the light of Chekhov-Wagner station. The light couldn't bounce off the curved, twisting walls of the tunnel, but the voice could. "Having learned of the treacherous plans of the Red Line to violate the peace accord to seize Teatralnya Station, I have decided to strike a preemptive blow." "The Fuhrer? But you said he was sleeping," Artyom said to Dietmar. "Right now, no one in the Reich is sleeping," Dietmar replied. At Chekhov-Wagner Station, Artyom was greeted by a long banner. "Welcome, dear guests from Polis." A file of men of various ages, dressed any old way, was lining up at the center of the hall, gawking with red, sleepless eyes and whispering uncertainly to each other. Junior officers looking like Alsatian dogs scurried along the ranks, shouting, clapping men on the shoulders and slapping their faces. Tables with placards on them were being set up and heaps of camouflage gear were being tipped onto them. Trolleys of guns were being trundled up, rumbling and clattering. At the far end of the platform, a tent with a red cross on it was being set up, and glances from the ranks were repeatedly drawn to it as if to a magnet. But the Red Line will stop at nothing to deprive the citizens of Teatralnya Station of their legal right to live a peaceful and happy life. It was a strange station, round-vaulted like a tunnel, and with archways like gun slots that had been sawn in the walls. Its white armor glittered brightly, and the lamps, old, genuine ones, had been polished, too. They seemed odd, not separate from each other, like at the other stations, not simply double or welded together in clusters, but with 20 of them at a time sitting on bronze gondolas in 2 rows, as if they too had been woken up in the middle of the night and forced to fall into line. And they also looked like the souls of slaves rowing their fleet galleys through an incredible white tunnel to their honestly earned heaven. "Where did you plant the mine?" Dietmar was walking fast, and Artyom could barely keep up with him. The faces in the ranks flashed by, and not one of them had time to take on any shape. Behind him, steel heels clattered on the granite as the guards strode along. "Down below, I went down the escalator," Artyom reported. "By the hermetic doors." "Did it bring everything down?" "Very thoroughly. Look here. At present, everything at Teatralnya is under our control, so I want to believe you. But I'll check, of course. If you did everything correctly, a decoration, an order." Dietmar chuckled. "You deserve an order for work like that." Suddenly, someone rushed out of the line across their path. The guards darted forwards and raised their Kalashnikovs. But it was some small, silly person, harmless, a little beard, steamed-up glasses. Excuse me, Mr. Officer, Mr. Dietmar, in the name of all that's holy. This is a mistake. I've been mobilized by mistake. I have a wife. Narine, you were just at our home. You've come from there." Dietmar remembered, halted, and waved the guards away. "Ilya Stepanovich, I'm here with an acquaintance of yours. What's the mistake?" "To flood the station with freaks. That is what they want. They are enraged by our resistance, and this horde is already at our gates. My Narine, her contractions have started after those explosions at Teatralnya. They took her into the maternity home. They said the waters could break at any moment, but her time still isn't due yet. Do you understand? Perhaps with proper bed rest she could... We have such a wonderful maternity home. But if they draft me into the army, or something happens there, what will she do? Now, who'll be with her? And if she gives birth, I have to be there. I must know what the child is, a boy or... And for this reason, I am declaring general mobilization. The Unteroffizier smiled at the teacher and put his hand on his shoulder. As they say, the Tsaritsa was delivered of a fright. Neither son, right, Ilya Stepanovich, nor daughter. Why are you saying that? Good Lord, it's a joke. I remember our conversation. Of course I do. Let's take a walk. He made a sign to the junior Alsatians and led Ilya Stepanovich away with his arm round his shoulders. Artyom walked alongside, crumpling the envelope in his pocket. What was in it? The envelope was hard. It had something inside it. What did it remind him of? Not a letter? Not paper? His head was splitting with the effort. The spring was running down. You were planning to write a history textbook for us, right? Dietmar asked the teacher. Mr. Officer, but if something happens during the birth, then sit down and write it. Start now, right away. History is being made before your very eyes. He stopped, removed Ilya Stepanovich's glasses, breathed on them, wiped them, and set them back in place. I'll set aside a corner for you in my headquarters, or else you could get killed. That's true. To defend a neutral station against the Red Hordes, that is our duty. They have begged us for help, and we are coming. Thank you. I'm very grateful, Mr. Dietmar Izis. But allow me to see my wife. Now, to support her. She looked terrible. I want her to know that everything is all right, that you intervened. And if the birth... But what for? Dietmar asked him. There's nothing that either you or I can change about that. If a healthy child is born, then good. There are people at the maternity home to congratulate the mother in the name of the party. But what if... Oh, damn it. What if, God forbid... And if it's a freak... Quiet now, quiet. Then we have a wonderful maternity home, as you said yourself. General anesthetic. And when she wakes up, it will all have been done. And the little child won't even feel a thing, believe me. They're all professionals there. The same anesthetic, only a different dose. Everything humane. One snip and it's done. Of course. Yes, I understand. Ilya Stepanovich was ashen-faced. It's just that it happened so soon. Her contractions. She was so anxious, my Narine. I thought there would still be time. And there still will be time, Ilya Stepanovich. The Unter tightened his grip on the teacher. What a good time there will be. So there's absolutely nothing for you to do in the maternity home, that's all. They'll give you paper and a pencil, and I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for you. He shoved the dumbstruck teacher towards one of the guards. Allocate this gentleman's space in my office. No one will stop us when we carry out our sacred duty. Where are we going? Artyom asked in alarm after they had walked almost all the way through the station. It ended at the steps of a pedestrian passage with sentries on guard. Well, you need to deliver this dispatch of yours, don't you? Dietmar looked round at him. What's in it, by the way? An ultimatum? A plea? A proposal to divide Tetralnaya among the interested parties? I don't know, said Artyom. The order, eh? Fool that I am, I ought to have guessed exactly what you were doing at Paulus, stalker. We shall always stand up for the rights of non-combatant civilians. We shall take Teatralnaya under our protection. We shall protect it against the hordes of the freaks. Who is Besilov? You mean you really don't have a clue what it is that you want to deliver to the Fuhrer? That's none of my business. I'm simply carrying out an order. I like you more and more. I'd even say that you're my ideal. Dietmar laughed. Tell a man to blow up a passage, and he blows up a passage. Tell him to deliver an envelope containing God only knows what from God only knows whom, and he does it. Tell him to stick his balls in a press, and he can't refuse to do that either. I wish I had more like you. And we are prepared to pay any price for the right to be called human. Is Homer alive? Artyom asked Dietmar. What's happened to my old man? Where is he? He's alive and waiting for you, Dietmar reassured him. I want to collect him first. Predictable. That's why we're going to him now. Another good thing about you, Stalker, is your predictability. It's a real pleasure working with such people." The sentries ground their heels together, and the commander of the watch threw out his arm, afraid even to look Dietmar in the eye. They started walking up the beveled steps. "You? Why do you wear those shoulder straps? You're no Unteroffizier, are you? Who are you?" "Me? An engineer of human souls." Dietmar winked at him. "And a bit of a magician." The passage was used as a barracks. The last time Artyom and Homer had not been allowed in here. There were rows of bunks. Orderlies saluted. The Fuhrer glowered down from posters. The standards of the Iron Legion hung down from the ceiling. A gray fist and a black three-fingered swastika. Loudspeakers grew out of the walls like mushrooms, trying to outshout each other. "There is no way back, and we shall not retreat. For the sake of your future, for the sake of our future, for the sake of our children's future, for the sake of the future of mankind." "What are you counting on with this little envelope?" Dietmar chuckled. "The train has already set off. You can't stop it, even if you throw yourself on the tracks. Teatralnaya is going to be ours, and Revolution Square will be too. The Reds won't be able to do a thing. They have their own hunger revolts to suppress as it is. Half the mushrooms rotted because of that dry mold. It's spreading like wildfire." "Who is Besolov?" Artyom repeated, wondering who Miller would accept orders from. "I have no idea." "Then why is a letter from some Besolov more important than a letter from Miller?" "It's not a letter from some Besolov that's more important to me, Stalker. You're more important." The barracks came to an end, and there were heaps of fortifications. Hedgehogs, barbed wire, black machine guns with their barrels pointing forward in the direction in which Dietmar was leading Artyom. Guard dogs started barking, mimicking the Fuhrer, and then, mingling with their ragged verse, there came a man's groan, a groan with which the life was probably departing from someone's body. Pushkin Station, Artyom realized. Dietmar was taking him to Pushkin Station. "Is he there? At Pushkin? You promised not to touch him!" They stopped at a brick wall that ran up to the ceiling, with an iron door in it. Dietmar dismissed the guard with his index finger. He took out a tobacco pouch, extracted some cut newspaper out of one pocket, sprinkled dried stuff onto the whimsical black letters, licked the paper and rolled it up. "Here, you have a smoke too." Artyom didn't disdain the offer. His soul had begged for poison back in Miller's office, but Miller had begrudged Artyom one final cigarette before discarding him forever, and now Dietmar had made the offer himself. The Unter leaned against the wall, propped his head back, and looked at the ceiling. "If our teacher's Armenian woman has a freak, what do you think? Will he write our book for us? If you kill it? The child? If we put it to sleep? Do you think he won't praise us in his little book?" "No, he won't," Artyom replied. "He couldn't be such a bastard." "Well now." Dietmar screwed up his eyes and blew out smoke. "But I think he will. I think the Armenian girl will feel bad about it, and she'll rail at our Ilya Stepanovich. But then he'll convince her that it's all right and good, that they just have to try again. And he'll sit down to write his book about the Reich, and then we'll publish it in an edition of 10,000 so that everyone in the metro who can read will read it. And the others will learn to read from it, and everyone will know Ilya Stepanovich's name. And for that, Ilya Stepanovich will forgive us for putting his little baby to sleep." "For 10,000 books! He'll surprise you yet!" Artyom smiled crookedly at Dietmar. "He'll flee from the station, maybe even make an assassination attempt. That kind of thing can't be forgiven." "It can't be forgiven, but it can be forgotten. Everyone comes to terms with himself. People rarely surprise me, Stalker. A man is arranged fairly simply. Everyone has the same gear wheels in their head. Here's the desire to live a bit better. Here's the fear. And here's the sense of guilt. And those are all the gear wheels a human being has. Tempt the greedy, wear down the fearless with guilt, intimidate the ones with no conscience. Take you. Why the hell did you show up here again? You knew you were risking your neck. Ah, but you've got a conscience. You're anxious about your old man. You blew up the passage because you've got a conscience. And now there's the hook. I can see it sticking out." Dietmar touched Artyom's cheek with a finger smelling of cigarette smoke, and Artyom jerked it away. "You swallowed it. And now you're stuck with me, aren't you? After all, you betrayed your order. You cozied up to the enemy. Your friends are there outside, waiting for you. They think you're their man, but you're not. You're mine. Artyom even forgot to smoke. The roll-up went out. Your tobacco's shit, he told Dietmar. Ah, but when the Reich is victorious throughout the metro, everyone will have excellent tobacco, Dietmar promised him. All right, let's go to see Homer Ivanitch. He winked at the sentry. A bolt 1 meter long with a massively heavy lock on it moved aside, and they were led into Schiller Station. Artyom remembered the station as Pushkin, as white and marble-faced as Chekhov next door, even though it was besmirched with hatred for non-Russians. At Pushkin, they had showed him to the crowd and explained why he had been condemned to the scaffold for killing a fascist officer. Artyom had killed the officer quite simply, pointed his automatic at him and squeezed the trigger. It was a spasm of his finger. The spasm cramped his finger when the officer put a bullet through the head of a young boy with Down syndrome. Forgivable. Artyom was young and impressionable. Now he would probably put up with it and turn away. Turn away? He would try to turn away. That tickling in his throat from the noose was far too strong. But now they weren't at Pushkin. This was Schiller. They were nowhere. The entire station had been taken apart and stripped. Not a single slab of marble was left. It had all been torn off and carried away. There was naked, scraped concrete. There were mounds of earth and rivers of mud, antiquated wooden props. Instead of air, there was a fine spray of mist mixed with cement dust, and that made the air concrete too. Searchlights lashed through the vapors, and their beams were visible from beginning to end, like immense clubs. These clubs drubbed at the backs and faces of hideous naked people. Some concealed their privates with a piece of rag. Others didn't bother. They were all stamped with black, all dripping blood. The ones who were men were overgrown with stubble right up to their eyes. The ones who were women seemed to have no eyes behind their tangled hair, but they were all normal, with 2 arms and 2 legs, and only the youngsters were warped and distorted. Twisted spines, fingers fused together, flattened heads, some one-eyed cyclopes, and some with 2 heads, and some thick-furred like animals. Freaks. No one was wearing any clothes. There were the naked and the ones in uniforms. The automatic riflemen wore respirators. This was bad for the health otherwise. The respirators looked like muzzles, as if without them the guards might fling themselves on the naked prisoners and gnaw on them with their teeth. But the muzzles meant they had to deal with them differently, with chains and whips of barbed wire. And they filled the air with the roaring that Artyom had heard from behind the wall, from the teacher's toilet. But the most terrifying thing about the station was that there was no end to it. In all directions, these naked beast humans were scrabbling dirt out of it, with pickaxes, spades, hammers, and fingernails, desperately scrabbling at the earth and the stone, gnawing out emptiness to the left and the right, upwards and downwards. Schiller Station was already the most cavernous station that Artyom had ever been in, and it was expanding with every minute. You use them as slaves? Artyom asked. Why not? More humane than simply liquidating them, isn't it? Let them do something useful. We're expanding our living space. Such a huge flood of volunteers from all over the metro and nowhere to accommodate them, Dietmar explained to him, straining to shout over the roaring of the freaks. When the reconstruction work is finished, there'll be a garden city here, the largest station in the entire metro, the capital of the Reich, a cinema, a sports hall, a library, and a hospital. So is this where your Führer got his idea about the freaks? So he could have slavery? Not even a quarter of these are freaks. But it's not up to you, Stalker, to decide who's a freak and who isn't. The Führer is a genius. It's stupid to persecute people because they're Armenians or Jews. That has zero effect. If a man was born a Jew, there's nothing that can be done about it. With some, it's even written on their faces. Jew, Chechen, Kazakh, and that's it. He's your target, he's your enemy, and he'll never be loyal to you. But if someone is Russian, does he have immunity now? Is he a chosen one simply by the fact of birth? Is he free to do whatever he likes? Maybe he has nothing at all to be afraid of now. That doesn't make sense. But genetic deformity now? Now that's a horse of an entirely different color. And mutations. Deformity's a tricky business. You're born healthy and then a tumor starts developing, or goiter, or other abnormalities. And perhaps they can't be seen with the naked eye at all. Only a doctor can say for certain. And so every bastard has to tremble in fear and shit himself when he goes to the doctor for a checkup. And the doctor has to tremble in fear too, and decide in consultation with us, the concilium, who is a freak and who isn't. And no one can be certain of anything, ever. And right through his entire life, you understand that, he has to justify his existence and vindicate ours. That's really beautiful, eh? Incredibly beautiful. He set his hand on Artyom's shoulder. The mole on the bridge of his nose became a third eye, granted to him as a demon, to allow him to see more clearly into the rotten, soft innards of human beings. "Where is he? Where's Homer?" Artyom shouted at him. "Give me the envelope. We had an agreement." A sudden shower of sparks. Artyom's teeth crunched, and the cave heeled over to one side. Dietmar had swung and smashed the butt of his pistol into Artyom's face, right against the cheekbone. Then he adjusted his grip on the gun and pressed the barrel against Artyom's forehead. A lethal pistol. A Stechkin. "Do you want me to take it off your body?" Artyom took a step back, wondering how he could manage to destroy the dispatch, but there were guards waiting behind him. They twisted his arms and threw him down, bending him over with his face to the dirt, and tore the envelope out of his hands. They handed it carefully to Dietmar, who twisted it in his fingers, tried to fold it, and looked at it against the powerful beam of a searchlight. "Photographs, I think," he said, squatting down beside Artyom. "That's curious. Photographs that stopped a war. That's beautiful, eh?" He put it in his inside pocket. "They must be damned good photographs, and the Fuhrer must really like them if no one else is supposed to see them, right? Who could resist the temptation to take just a little peep at something like that? You, for instance. Aren't you interested? Where's Homer?" "He's here somewhere. Look for him." "I don't have any time for that. I have to get to Teatralnia. Humanitarian aid, identifying agents. You stay here for a while. Get used to the place. Do a bit of work." "They won't abandon me. Let Yaga and the Order. They're waiting for me. You're all done for here. Do you hear me, you scumbag? You lousy bastard! Do you hear me, you dirtbag?" Artyom tried to jump up, but the guards were well fed and experienced, and they were holding him tight, so he stayed down on all fours with his face in the dirt. Before he got up from his squatting position, Dietmar stroked Artyom on the head. "They're waiting. Yes, they're definitely waiting, aren't they? And now I'll go and tell them whose little man you are." And he gave Artyom an affectionate slap on the backside.